This e-lecture is part of Pearson's professional development series for first-year writing instructors.
My name is Lizbeth Bryant. I direct the writing program at Purdue University-Calumet. It's a regional campus of the Purdue system. I want to talk today about teaching, one of the things that most of us do in writing programs. When I ask people what they teach, they usually tell me I teach writing, and I look at them and I say, do you really teach writing or do you teach students? And I ask a lot of my new graduate assistants that question because I think that that's what we're supposed to do, is teach students, which is not a cliche for me. It's more what I'm supposed to do. When I first started teaching writing, I was a GA, and the writing program administrator gave me a program to follow, and so I did what I was supposed to do. I gave the assignment, we did some readings, then we did some pre-writing assignments, and students came back with a draft, and we had writing workshops, and then I took the draft home and I read them. And I sat down, I wrote my comments like I had been taught to do, and I did this for a couple papers, and then I realized one day that I was talking to the piece of paper, and I was writing all these comments, and I thought, Liz, this isn't right. So I began to think about what I was doing, and I was having conversations with the students' work. And what I really needed to be doing was I needed to be talking to the student. Before I started to teach, I'd spent a couple years in the Writing Center, and I'd really learned how to interact with students, how to get students to interact with their text. So what I started at that point was realizing that I really needed to go back into the classroom and teach the student. And I also thought about whether that comment on the piece of writing really helped the student. And then I really wondered, does it really help the writing? And a lot of us know from some of our work and some of the research that's been done, they say that students don't pay a lot of attention to our comments on papers. Sometimes they get thrown away. I also started to think about what is my job? And my job, I believe, is to be student-centered. It's to help the student become a better writer. And if the only thing I do is interact with that paper, it's not doing much good. So I started telling myself that my job is to teach students to write, not to teach writing to students. And in this student-centered perspective, I end up changing my orientation to what I do, especially in responding to student work. I started to implement many more conferences, so I started to fall back on sort of the reading I had done about Donald Murray and his conferencing. And when I respond to students and their work, my job is to discover what they're doing. How did you come up with this idea? How did you get it into shape and form? How did you revise? And these are a lot of the questions I ask students when I conference, because I want them to discover, and I want them to tell me and themselves what they're doing, okay, so that we can begin to judge whether what they're doing works. So that the next time I conference with them, we do it again, and we talk about how they're progressing and growing as writers. So it's really important to me with the students is to discover the process that they're working, whether that process is working for them, and we talk about that a lot. Does this work? We talk about procrastination. Does that work for you? And they say, yes, well, I get it done. And so we work through a lot of that kind of stuff that students do. My job is to help them to assess their success in the different activities they go through and give them the support to grow. One of the next things that it changes sort of my orientation to is the work I do as a WPA in terms of record keeping and grading. This past semester, I've had students come and they were sort of complaining about their grade. Students do this a lot, and I went back to both of these teachers and I said, well, tell me what you worked with those students on. And the students were really unable to do that. They were able to give me a list of grades, but they weren't able to sort of sit down with me and give me any evidence of what they worked with the student on. And when a teacher can't tell me about that student and what the student worked on, then I know that they're really not teaching the student as much as they are teaching the writing. I always go back to my graduate students and I say, you need to keep notes about your students. I don't want to see a list of grades. I want to see the notes that you made about what you're doing with the students. The next thing, and it sort of changes my orientation to, is what we do in professional development. What I find a lot that we do as teachers, we talk about what we're doing in the classroom, what pedagogy we're working on, what orientation we're coming from. In the public school system, we have standards. I mean, you go and you look on the webpage and there are all these standards, what we're supposed to be covering with students. We don't talk so much about what our students are doing, how we're supposed to be helping them. It's more of what we're supposed to be doing. And I think we begin to lose our focus. We talk about, are the essays in our curriculum sequenced? Which pedagogy is better to use? Should we use cultural studies? Should we use process pedagogy? Should we use working in the community? And as all of those new orientations to teaching have come into our background in what we can do in composition, I still believe that when it comes to what we do, we need to think about who our students are. And we've been doing some research. Rich Haswell has the research that he's done in gaining ground in college writing. And a lot of people who have at points studied students and how we progress. Sometimes I think that we forget that's what our job is. And we forget when we have all these standards and we have everybody telling us what to do, that we forget when we walk into the classroom that I have a group of students. Right now I have a class that is filled with 2 gentlemen who have been laid off from work because of the steel and the auto industry. What are they doing? Where are they coming from? They're totally different from the high school student I have who will be a senior next year. And so my job is to find out what they need and what they're doing. And I want to sort of share that with you. And as you plan classes, curriculums, assignments, is to think about, where am I including the student in this? Maybe one of the first things you can do is listen to how Michael Flockman talks about kinesthetic learning in another one of these e-lectures. Thank you.
For additional e-lectures, visit Pearson's professional development site for first-year writing instructors at www.pearsonhighered.com/compro.